After Raiden and Pliskin disarmed the C4 planted within shells 1 and 2, Raiden received shocking news from a now mobile Peter Stillman. All the C4s were nothing more than diversions for the real explosives, large enough to disturb the structure's integrity. Additionally, the real bombs were programmed to activate after all the smaller C4s had been disarmed. Although Raiden is able to disarm the bomb on Strut A, after returning to the deep-sea dock, the bomb on Strut H detonates, killing Stillman. Pliskin, on the other hand, is able to survive unscathed. As Raiden prepares to leave Strut A, he's confronted by Fortune, who had been expecting to find someone else. Nevertheless, she asks Raiden to bring her death. Raiden, unable to harm her, can only evade her attacks, and shortly thereafter, Vamp arrives to inform Fortune that Fatman has gone rogue. Taking advantage of the distraction, Raiden takes another shot at Fortune, but the bullets are deflected and hit Vamp in the forehead and lower chest. While Fortune cradles Vamp in her arms, lamenting that she cannot follow him in death, Raiden escapes. However, moments later, Vamp awakens, having shrugged off his seemingly fatal attack.
With the bomb's countdown having already begun, Raiden heads to the heliport and neutralizes the explosive. He's then confronted by Fatman, who professes his disinterest in the terrorists' goals. Fatman is also suspiciously unaware of the ransom demands for $30 billion. His only wish is to surpass his former mentor, Peter Stillman, and become the most famous bomber in history by destroying the entire Big Shell. Challenging Raiden to stop him, he places multiple explosives in the area, utilizing his quick speed. Raiden is forced to neutralize each bomb with coolant spray while simultaneously fighting Fatman. The perseverance pays off, with Fatman collapsing from his injuries. After informing Raiden that he has yet to disarm the biggest bomb in the place, Fatman dies. Raiden, however, discovers the last bomb, which had been hidden beneath Fatman's body. Let's start with Peter Stillman, because he encapsulates a huge part of this game, but there is another part that comes like just in a few scenes with Vamp that happens a little bit later that kind of... So Peter Stillman lays out this idea of, you gotta teach the memes, man. You can't just like show people how to do stuff. You have to teach them how to do it the right way. You have to give them the ideology, the ideal, the reason, the purpose for doing things. You have to teach them what's good to do and what's not good to do, right? And the part that really jumped out to me like crazy is the part when he starts, and this is a little bit later as we're kind of just interacting on the telecom. I think there's a bomb that's like, oh, you never get there in time. We're in trouble. This is bad. And Peter Stillman's like, oh, I can get there just fine, right?
Yes.
Like, what are you talking about? And it's like, don't you have a cane or whatever? It's probably Raiden who says it. But
yeah, he says, I think
don't you have a
Stillman himself, he's like, I can walk. I can even run.
I can even run.
And he's like, what are you talking about? He's like, basically, I faked my injury.
He faked his injury. He says that he pretends to limp and he walks with the cane. I don't know if he had a cane or not, but he pretends to limp at least. I think he even went so far as to say that he has a prosthetic leg or something like that.
Yes.
He does not.
No.
Like, oh, that's a real looking prosthetic leg. Yeah, they make them really good these days, you know? They look just like the real thing.
It's totally lying.
It's his real leg. That was his real leg. And he says that he needed to be a victim too after his failure, right? So he failed so hard that the only way he could live with himself, the only way he could show himself in public is if he garnered sympathy of some sort from other people. Oh, I got hurt too, man. Oh man, that was such an unfortunate thing that happened. Yeah, I mean, you know, I can't walk anymore. Something similar in the Sherlock TV show, remember? With Watson? And where it's like, there was some PTSD that resulted in him being like, oh, I can't walk. And of course, Sherlock Holmes kind of sees right through it and is like, you could totally walk if you tried. That one was, he had convinced himself. And this one, Peter Stillman, perfectly aware the whole time, I can do whatever I want. I don't need to walk with a limp, right? So if he came away unscathed, he couldn't show his face in public anymore. And this is totally mimetic, right? The building that was destroyed in the bomb that he was unable to stop was a church.
Yes.
And the people who died were children, right? He's talked about this. Oh, I didn't have any children of my own, right? So I thought I found a son in Fatman. Just wonderful. It's just great line. But it's the loss of these children, right? Oh no, the children died because of me. This is bad. And then the building that was lost is a church. A church is a meme museum, right? It is a collection of memes.
Yeah.
And there's something to that, right? That because of him, the memes got destroyed, and then the future, the children who were to carry on these memes died, right? And it's like, oh, the whole world. And so it's almost as if he needed to convince himself that, well, it's not that important anyways. All you really need to know is how to do stuff, right? And he is only now having the realization of like, okay, I should really face what actually happened, right? That was a horribly tragic loss, and it was my fault, instead of trying to be like, it's not that big a deal, right? I'm okay. I got hurt too. Everything, like I'll just maybe like the meme stuff isn't all that important anyways, And it seems like that's kind of the conflict that he's having here.
Well, it actually takes me back to when you first meet him, actually, when he's like explaining the whole situation. And at first he's like, no, I'm going to go disarm these bombs myself. Yeah. And it's Snake who insists like, you're just going to slow us down.
You'll slow us down.
And eventually, in order to keep his cover, he has to acquiesce. But he didn't actually want to do that in the first place. Yeah. He wanted to be out there in the field, like disarming them himself.
Right.
But like, in order to like save face, he eventually had to just like
hide in a pantry, right?
Yeah.
With lots of food.
Yeah.
And locked in there and just talking on the microphone, right? Like, I don't know. You can't be too hard on the guy because he did go through something horribly traumatic. But at the same time, when things are on the line, you got to step up, and he knows how to do these things. And possibly had he just been like, oh, I can walk fine, don't bother me with this from the beginning, then a lot of what ends up happening may not have happened, right?
Sure.
So anyways, he neglected the memes, right? And caused people to die. And then he probably realized at some point that he shouldn't be so negligent of memes because they're important for children to learn. These things need to be learned at a young age, and his lack of care around the memes, how to act, morality, ethics, they led to a disaster at the church. And that disaster led to the real disaster, which is Fatman. That's the real disaster here.
Yeah.
And so he thought that he could just ignore them. Perhaps he thought that it was just common sense to not behave how Fatman currently does, right? That everyone should just know you're not supposed to do that, right? It's common sense, right? But common sense only works if people have things in common, right? So the common stuff that you and I have gone through, or the way we were raised, and the commonalities that we share are what make common sense even possible.
Common sense.
Yeah. So if you don't raise somebody up with those connections, with the commonalities that other people share, having been raised up in these certain ways, then the common sense doesn't exist, right? He's going to act however he wants to act, and it's not pre-programmed in his DNA that you're not supposed to do certain things, right? It's learned. This is acquired stuff, and the acquisition of which Peter Stillman severely neglected to give to Fatman by all means, like severely neglected. So Peter Stillman just assumed that Fatman should know better, and he never made any effort to instill ethics, right? And his fake injury ended up becoming a shield for him. I think he says that more or less. It became a shield for me. He says he killed his soul by playing the victim. He went against the memes. He went against what he knew he should do. So you need to take responsibility for your own actions and move past them. And he couldn't do it. And not just Fatman, it's himself. He didn't care about the memes. He didn't think that they were very important. That's why he didn't pass them on in the first place. He felt like life was about taking advantage and getting yours from other people, even if it meant lying. He wasn't always like that. He kind of was forced to become like that. He says, God forgive me. This is one of like his last lines. God forgive me. He left the straight and narrow, but he is now going to try to get back on it through self-sacrifice. And that's actually his whole arc here. And so you're getting this really, really positive view of what memes are, how powerful they are, what they can do. And then him finally, by going out and doing what he should have done a long time ago, of course, as we're going to cover throughout this next little bit, he goes to disarm the last bomb, basically.
Yeah.
And it doesn't work. The Fatman tricked him, and he's gonna die now, right? Peter Stillman left the straight and narrow, but he is now going to try to get back on it through self-sacrifice, an embodiment of the memes that he learned growing up, I'd imagine. He says that Fatman's crimes are also his sins of omission and arrogance. He says, "This is the only way that I can diffuse my own sins." I thought that was a great bomb lingo way of talking about, you got to diffuse the sins, right? He's totally a bomb teacher, right? The real bomb by which the shell and perhaps soon the world will be destroyed, it's less the bombs that were the sin, and it's more that the memetics were the sin. His sin was not passing on the memes, and that sin is leading to this huge, crazy situation, which is ballooning out of control. This is hugely thematic for the game, and I think it's all right here. Peter Stillman is reborn. Pegleg Peter is dead. This new Peter Stillman is reborn, and it's through confessing his sins. That's how he basically has become reborn. It's this process that he worked through with Snake and Raiden that has led him to this point where he's like, I have now confessed and shall now forsake, and am now going to move forward in imitation of Jesus, basically. I don't know. It's really interesting that you see this whole basically Christian story kind of unfold with him. And I think this was totally done on purpose. But the craziest thing is that Hideo Kojima, and he's quite good at this, he kind of undercuts that message just a little bit later with Vamp. And we're going to talk about this soon. But just know that this whole allegory thing is really good, and I think was really well done. And I really liked it a lot. And I was like, wow, I can't believe Kojima's going this hard in this one direction. And he's not. He's actually going to confuse you pretty horribly. This is just the very beginning of the whole thing. He's presenting to you through Peter Stillman this very high church religious Christian way of viewing memes and what memes can mean and be and what they can push people to do, right? To even to their own death, which is typically against the concept of the selfish gene. It is, I will give my own life so that these people I just met 2 minutes ago, they're going to be the ones that go on, and I don't know, they seem like better guys than me anyways. I'll go ahead and die for those people. Okay, that's interesting, right? It's interesting. But yeah, with Vamp, we're going to see kind of the opposite of that.
Yeah, it's a good handoff to some of my notes for Vamp that we didn't get to last time. There's kind of a lot to talk about, and a lot of this is revealed by Pliskin, Snake, when you sort of spam the codec with him after having talked to Peter Stillman, and he gives more information on the Dead Cell members.
Yeah.
Tells you more about Scott Dolph, who is the father of Fortune.
Oh, yeah.
Who was a former lover with Vamp, and all of this extra stuff, which, is interesting, but probably not that important. So as part of these codec conversations, it's revealed that Vamp was essentially buried alive in the rubble of a church that was blown up. It is the same one.
No way!
Yeah.
I didn't even think of that. That's
so
crazy.
Vamp as a child was in this church that was blown up.
So Peter Stillman, wow.
It
all comes back to him.
Quote unquote responsible.
Nah.
Obviously not, but the way that someone with trauma might look at it.
Yes.
And I'm not even sure. I'm sure he is aware, but I'm not sure whether or not that. I'm just not certain that's true, that Vamp knows this, or that Vamp even knows Peter Stillman is here. All I'm saying is that he was there. He was, I think, impaled by a crucifix and was buried in the rubble for 2 days.
And that's how he gained this immortality.
This is how the vampire kind of image or part of his personality or whatever, it's kind of its origins or where it came from.
That's funny because impaled by a crucifix is supposed to be how you kill vampires, right?
And he's afraid. He has trauma surrounding
him.
This event, so he's afraid of crucifixes. This is all stuff that doesn't make it into the text necessarily of the main story, but is there kind of in the background if you go looking for it. Whether it's through codex, whether it's through material that's been written about it, I think it's the game plan, the planning document for the game.
That whole thing. Yeah.
Things like that. You can find information like this.
Yeah, that's a big one.
So that's one thing that I think is at least significant enough to mention about this. But at the same time, there's a couple of other things that I wanted to bring up too that, again, I just kind of forgot. So the character is inspired by a Spanish dancer.
Oh, yeah. Flamenco.
I think it's
right.
Joaquin, or I don't know how you would pronounce the J in Spanish.
Yeah,
I think
Joaquin.
it would be
Yeah,
Joaquin.
Yeah.
Joaquin Cortez. So I think I'm saying that right.
Joaquin Cortez.
So you'll notice this when you get into the Vamp fight, like the boss fight with him a little bit later, but he'll like go up on top of these rails and he's just sort of like dancing. And it's even true of when he's dodging bullets. It's like he's a dancer who's sort of spinning and pirouetting around. And like, so that's where that element of his design comes from. So that's one part of it. But the other thing that was interesting is that originally Vamp was supposed to be a female character. Wasn't supposed to be a male character. That got changed in development. So I don't know if you got this line by talking with Snake in the codec or not. It's really funny. So he's explaining Vamp's backstory and origins and talking about the vampire imagery like I was just describing, the crucifix and all this.
I think I missed this.
And then Raiden is like, so that's why they call him Vamp. He's like, no, Vamp isn't for vampire. It's because he's bisexual.
Now, can someone explain that? Do you know
I have
what connection?
tried really, really hard to understand.
Is it a Japanese thing?
No, it doesn't make sense no matter which way you cut it.
Okay.
It would have made sense if Vamp had been a woman, which was the original, because there is a slang term Vamp, which is like a seductress.
Okay.
Like there is a slang sort of bent to that term Vamp that works for a woman who's seducing you but has like ulterior motives or something like that, right? Like that exists sort of like as a thing.
Okay.
It definitely doesn't exist as a thing for bisexuals.
Yeah.
So I have no idea what, if anything, or if it's just being silly, is meant by this line.
I wonder if somebody can enlighten us, please.
I really don't think there's an explanation. I think that originally they had this idea to be a twist. At least this is just my speculation. No, it's not Vamp as in vampire. It's Vamp because she seduces men and then like kills them or something like that. That was like originally in mind. And you for some reason, you don't want to lose this like twisting on the word vamp.
Yeah.
So they just throw in bisexual, but it has no connection as far as I understand it.
That's weird.
And I've really looked hard to see if there is any.
Did they just screw up? Was that a line they forgot to go back and rewrite? Because I would imagine that a lot of these lines were written well ahead of time. And that, I mean, in the time it takes to model and animate and rig and do all that stuff for Vamp, that they had a lot of time to, they knew this woman got cut earlier in production.
I don't get it.
It
feels like it's a holdover for something else it was supposed to be.
Yeah.
That for some reason they didn't just cut that line. Because it has no connection to bisexuality at all.
I wonder
in any slang like context, as far as I understand it. So it's a really weird line. It's very bizarre when he says it. And there's another really, really bizarre thing coming up towards the end of what we're going to talk about today when we get to the president.
Oh gosh, yeah, that was
it's just strange. One of those things in Metal Gear where sometimes, like I said, this is why it's so confusing.
Yeah.
Sometimes to know whether or not something is just silly, don't think too hard about it.
Yeah.
Whether it's stupid or whether it's like purposeful and there's just a reference you don't know about that you need to look into more. But this line is... It's
I wonder, I might
it's out there.
Look into the Japanese. Did you look into any of that?
So that's another thing. And I was going to ask about the Japanese on something later. Other people have asked this question.
Okay.
I don't think there's a sufficient explanation for this either.
Well, my understanding from reading some of the developer notes from Kojima, and it's a long document. I'm only familiar with a little bit of it, but he would every now and then in development just like throw out something like subversive or something just different or or he had all sorts of ideas about something like this would be like, oh, why don't we make Vamp a bisexual? And like things like that, where he would just throw it out and then the team would kind of like vote on it and whether they would do it or not. And then some of his ideas got voted down. Some of his ideas went through. And then they just kind of did it. But it seems like this one just didn't have any thought put behind it. If it was intentional at all, which I think it was.
Yeah.
It just had very little thought put behind it, in which case somebody was like, okay, I'll put in a line where it says he's bisexual. Like, okay, I like that. Whatever, just throw it in somewhere. The thing that's
confusing about it is like, and as Recoloring is saying here, one of the definitions for vamp in the dictionary is exploiting men through sex appeal. So, okay, so maybe they're trying to lean into the fact that
so it's used for women, but
even though he's a man, he's still exploiting men through sex appeal, through bisexuality, but it still has nothing to do with bisexuality. It just has to do with seduction through sex appeal. That's like what the term is really supposed to be. But they didn't know what to do with this when they changed Vamp from a woman to a man.
That's funny.
But anyway, that's why he's called Vamp, because he's bisexual, not because he's a literal blood-sucking vampire, which he is.
Once again, this is Snake passing the deep wisdom of many decades of life, you know?
Yeah. Okay, those were my notes on Vamp. I took this line down from the Colonel, but this is a little bit later. This is after you've gone ahead and disabled the big bomb on not in the core of Shell 1, but on Strut A at the bottom, that one that's like underneath the thing.
Yeah.
So the one that Stillman fails to stop destroys a Strut H. It's like a big explosion, and like that whole thing is messed up now.
Yeah.
But Raiden is successful in stopping his. So after you've done that, the terrorists have said, like, we've executed a hostage in retaliation for having done this.
Right. The Colonel says this.
We're going to start killing one every hour now until our ransom demands are met.
Right.
We'll get back to the ransom demands here very shortly. But
was it $30 billion or something?
Yes. And, you know, this is where Raiden comes back out and, like, Fortune is, like, waiting. She thinks it's going to be someone else.
Yes.
Turns out it's not.
Well, I think
she thought it was Snake.
She thinks it's going to be Snake, yeah.
And then, you know, there's that battle where you can't hit her and she's just sort of, like, firing the gun. You just have to evade that.
There's a fascinating line there where she looks at Raiden and she says, oh, you're not who I thought you were, but you look like you've seen the fires of hell.
You could do it.
Yeah, you've seen the fires of hell. Maybe you can kill me. Kill me, please. In a very Michael Jackson sounding voice.
Yeah. And so then this is where I'm just kind of quickly going through the scene because this line comes, I think, before then from the Colonel.
Okay.
But then Vamp comes down and essentially reveals Fatman has, like, betrayed us. He's gone rogue.
Yes.
We need to, like, take care of that because he's freaking crazy. And there's a new countdown for an even bigger bomb.
I love the countdowns, man.
And it's like, you got to go stop him before he destroys this whole place.
Right.
So, like, that's kind of the scenario happening. Raiden is talking about how, like, he can't do this mission by himself. He needs some backup. He needs some support.
Yeah.
And the Colonel keeps saying, that's not what this is. This is a solo mission. You're on your own. Figure it out. So the Colonel then says, are you expecting that Pliskin to come through? Looks like he's turned his radio off too. And then Raiden says, I can't complete this mission on my own. And the Colonel says, that man was not included in the simulation. He's not a factor in this mission. Now, he says something similar to this again, even within the part we're going to be talking about today. So I think this is the second time, and what will come up the next time will be the third time he has referred to the simulation. Like, this was not a part of the simulation.
Yeah. This
was not a factor. Don't, like, ignore this. It has no bearing on your job here. So if they're repeating this 3 times, I'm just telling you to take note of it.
Yeah, it kind of makes me wonder. There were a lot of people commenting about the PS1 VR stuff in our last
missions.
episode. Some people played all 300 missions. And some people,
there's exactly saying, 300 missions, right?
And that's what Raiden says. I've completed 300 missions.
Yes, which means he, like, 100%ed or like platinum trophied the
Yeah.
game, right?
Yeah.
He like mastered. He got all the trophies. He got all the achievements in VR missions. So you have to then run after Fatman. What notes do you have on?
Well, I
him?
have notes for the fight with Vamp.
The fight. The fight with Vamp later.
The fight with Fortune, where Vamp shows up and he gets shot in the head.
Yeah.
Right. Vamp says Fatman has lost sight of our ideals, is what he said, and that one line is really important for understanding this game and Kojima, like what he's doing with it, right? Because Peter Stillman was like, "Oh, I forgot the memes." This is actually a battle of memes, is what's happening here. It's a battle of memes, and their ideals are different from Peter Stillman's, right? Neither side instilled the proper ideals, right? But which side has the right memes? It's not just memes. It's what of the billion memes, what are like the 10 that are the best? There are so many memes you can't even count them. And so if you're going to look at the original game and say, okay, it's about genes and that this one's about memes, the big question is, but which memes, right?
Yeah.
It seems simple at first when Peter Stillman is talking. And then as soon as you hear about your bad guys saying the same thing, we didn't instill our memes. Oh, the problem is the meme. Dang it, we didn't instill our memes into Fatman. It leads you to realize like, oh, crap. And then whatever third party or the president or anybody else, it's like, oh, dang it. This battle of memes is it's a whole different landscape that has like 1,000 different factions, and it's all over the place. They're all over the place. And it's not about just instilling memes. It's only about selecting the right ones, and how do you know which ones are right? It throws everything into chaos.
It's almost as if you can't control a singular set of memes to be the memes.
No. The system should serve the people, not the people serving the system, right? So if you have this brilliant idea that's so good, except darn it, just the people won't do it. It's like, what system are you designing here? You're designing a system for people. If your input into the equation is, dang it, if only the people weren't there, the system would be perfect. You've screwed up. Like your math is wrong. You're prioritizing the wrong thing. Right? That's not the variable. That's the constant. Your variable that you had added to it, that's the problem, right? So a system that works great without people and oh, darn it, the people screwed up my perfect system. That's just funny. But a lot of people will think that way because you'll try to invent your own meme, right? It's like, oh, I've got it. Here's the idea. This is how we fix the problems. Dang it, people don't agree with me. They're the problem now because my idea can't be the problem. It's got to be them. So anyways, these memes kind of emerge organically, and that's why nobody can control them, right? You can't control the memes. They emerge through communities and societies and that kind of stuff, through trial and error often.
So we'll definitely be returning.
We will, because there's a lot of
to that in a bit.
There's a lot of this.
I saw several people commenting throughout the time that we've been doing this series. Oh, I'm excited to see, or I'm interested to see what they're going to say about laugh and grow fat. So I was like, there must be something significant to this. So I started researching.
Okay, what did you find?
Not a lot. I hate to disappoint people. As far as I can tell, this is a Victorian age proverb that essentially means a cheery attitude will, like, help you succeed in life. It's going to like lead you to success. So laughing will result in growing fat. Like having that kind of attitude about life, not being positive, will lead to good things.
Okay.
As far as the etymology of what that means,
right?
I think that's
it.
So, as far as what Fatman means when he says it, I would say something mostly kind of similar to that.
Sure.
I'm not sure it goes much deeper than that, which is why I'm curious now about what other people saw in it that they were like so excited for us to talk about.
It was an eat, drink, and be merry is basically what I saw from that. Laugh and grow fat is eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die, something like that. And like, it's not that complicated. It's not that deep.
I don't think it is.
Fatman's a very simple person. He's very simple.
Yeah.
Everyone's like, oh, I don't understand him. But it's like, no, he's the most simple one. He's just in it for himself. He's just doing whatever he thinks is good for him.
As Beardmo here is saying, I'm just a fat guy that loves the scene.
Oh, okay.
Like, If it's nothing more than that, if you just like, it's a funny line and I like it, then okay, I guess I'm on board. But I was given this impression by more than 2 people asking this that I was like, there must be something deeper to that, and I really can't find it if there is.
I can offer a little bit that this is gosh, how would I put it? Live for yourself and do your own thing.
Well, create your own
that's
legend.
it.
That's what he's all about.
Well, yes.
He's all
but
about
he's only in it for himself.
a legacy. Like he wants to be remembered
as the
in
best
history
bomber,
as the best bomber ever.
Yeah.
Like and Raiden like makes fun of him. Like that's so dumb. No one's gonna care about that.
He actually gets mad too.
And he's like,
oh,
you boorish military types. Like, shut up. but Raiden's right on the money. Like no one is going to remember a bomber
not at all
in history as some like great person.
And, especially,
even, I mean, I know that there have been like bombings where like, say, Oklahoma City bombing or whatever. Like, obviously, if that's what he's talking about, but I don't think that's what he's talking about. I think he wants to be remembered as being better than Peter Stillman, like surpassing the master, and like some sort of like respect, like placed on his name for this.
Well, but here's the thing. But if you just go by Fatman, is that his name? Does he not have a name?
I think it's a code name.
I thought so too. So, but if your goal is I'm going to achieve this worldwide fame,
what's your
and then
actual
everyone's
name?
Like, oh, somebody who called himself Fatman. It's not you. It wasn't your name. Like people don't even know you.
Like the dude's so delusional. He thinks like movies are going to be made about him. Like the line he says at the end there is he's like dying, right? When he tells Raiden there's one more bomb left. It's the biggest one of all. You know, can you find it? You know, the hint was that he's like sitting on top of it. It's like he's the bomb essentially. So you have to like pick him up and move him off it.
Yeah. But he's already dead.
He says, "Go ahead, shoot me. I'm already dead.
Yeah.
Think you can find it? When it goes off, it'll take the big shell with it. Tell me where I can find the bomb. That's your problem. This is the highlight of the party. Bring it on, I say. They'll be happy too. There's a special emphasis on they'll.
The Patriots.
I think he's referring to the Patriots or Lalululelo. I die here and start my legend. Too bad you won't be around to see the movies. Laugh and grow fat." So there's an element of this guy's just delusional. He's really just is crazy.
No, I don't even. I wonder even if he's crazy. I think he is acting perfectly rationally given his insanely nihilistic like understanding of the world with no memes.
I should clarify. I don't mean like clinically insane. I mean like delusionally insane.
Yes. Except I think he is acting very rationally given what he understands about the world and what it means. Like to die with glory is the only thing you can hope for because the world is meaningless. And it's like an absurdist, like a Camus kind of absurdism idea. The world is absurd, laugh and grow fat and go out with a bang if you can. That's irrational within the nihilistic frame, you know. I don't know that I can necessarily say that he is being irrational in that the way he's behaving.
I don't think his behavior is again like clinically insane or it's irrational in one way. It's
irrational according to the memes.
It's delusional in the sense that he thinks people are going to make movies about him.
Yes,
that's really what I'm getting at.
Yeah, that's not going to happen. Yeah,
he is trying to pass on a meme.
Yes, he is actually. He is
like through this act,
and it's live for yourself. That's basically what it is.
It's all about I'm going to establish a legend. I will immortalize myself in the memories of people.
Well, we should probably talk a little bit about where that name comes from, which is it's the name of one of the nuclear bombs dropped on Japan.
That's true.
A long time ago. And of course, he has chosen a code name after one of the bombs that got dropped in World War II.
Didn't Peter Stillman say he built a nuclear bomb at the age of 10?
Like 10. That's one of the Kojima things when I'm just like, look, man, I'll look the other way for that line. But yeah, that's insane. To even have access to what you would need to do that is like, it doesn't matter how smart you are at 10 years old.
Absurd.
Yeah, you're not getting that material. So yeah, but he is named after the bomb, and that bomb did change the world. The Fatman bomb changed the world. And so he's trying to live up to that legacy. A bomb that destroys things does alter the course of the world and does provide a sacrifice upon which a new world can then be established, which is exactly what happened when Fatman dropped in Japan.
I almost skipped over this because there's some things where I feel like I said it in like our intro video leading into this series where I was talking about how absurd Metal Gear can be, where on the one hand, you have all this like careful plotting of like government conspiracies. And then on the other hand, you're fighting a big fat guy in a bomb suit who's like cruising around on rollerblades while you fight him. He's like literally skating around.
That's really funny. It's because rollerblades were cool back then though.
Yes.
25 years ago.
But like
I think they were cool. I was little.
gun/bomb fight with a guy.
That's crazy.
Like on rollerblades. Then somebody brought up in the comments last week a really interesting point, and it was kind of building on the case that I was making about the similarities between this game and the first game's missions in terms of their structure and the order of events and what happens and how they line up really well. And he was making the correlation between the Fatman boss fight and the Vulcan Raven boss fight, which happens in a tank. So he was rolling through on a tank on those wheels, and he's a big armored guy, right? So like there's sort of a parallel there between, and it's also the second boss, I think, right? Because you fight Ocelot first, I believe, and then Vulcan Raven second. I can't remember. But anyway, there's like a similarity there, like a shadow of the Shadow Moses mission.
That's interesting.
That's sort of built into those rollerblades that makes them slightly less silly than they were before.
A little more meaningful, like the smallest amount.
Just a little. It's still really dumb and silly, but like, you know, that's Metal Gear for you.
All right, we have to read something real quick from the chat here. You scroll up and read this entry on David Hahn. So Beardmo on our Discord chat is saying that there was once a Boy Scout who made a nuclear reactor at the age of 17.
Whoa.
And he died of exposure to radiation. His name was David Hahn, and he posted the Wikipedia article here. Yes, radioactive Boy Scout is what he was named, the nuclear Boy Scout. He built a homemade neutron source at the age of 17. That maybe a 10-year-old could do it. If a 17-year-old could do it. Is that ridiculous?
I mean, there is a big difference between 17 and 10, but you are correct. It did become less ridiculous.
It just became a little less. So with your connection with the tank.
How did a 17-year-old get?
I know his dad probably got arrested. Is what I'm thinking.
He succeeded. He
got the merit badge.
He did exactly what Fatman was trying to do. He became a meme. He became a legend.
Jeez. I mean, props to you if you can do that. Don't do it.
No, I don't give props to you. It's a real bad idea.
A nuclear reactor is different than a nuclear bomb.
Sure.
It's a power source.
Right. Yeah. This guy collected radioactive material from old smoke detectors.
What? Oh, over time. Back in the day, they used to. Over time. Oh, wow.
Slowly, bit by bit.
Wow.
He didn't have a dad who worked in.
But he wasn't even that old.
For a nuclear power plant or anything.
Well, I would guess that smoke detectors no longer use that material, but maybe
I would
they
guess
do.
not.
Well, thermometers don't use mercury anymore, so I would hope that it's so funny, like lead pipes and all the stuff that they used to do, like dental fillings used to be done with, is it mercury or something like that, where it was like, this, you're going to die. This is not good for you.
It's freaking crazy. With the bomb threat now over, the colonel informs Raiden that the hostages, including the president, are still in danger. Afterward, Pliskin tells Raiden that the only way to rescue the hostages is to extract them via helicopter. Raiden leaves the heliport to locate the president when a cyborg ninja confronts him. The ninja tells him that a Secret Service agent named Richard Ames knows the president's location but is being held hostage in the Shell 1 core. The mysterious informant then provides Raiden with an enemy uniform, which he uses to infiltrate the core. However, the ninja also warns Raiden that Ames can only be identified by a unique heartbeat due to a pacemaker, necessitating a remote sound amplifier to locate him.
Once Raiden locates Ames in the Shell 1 core, Ames tells him that the president is in the Shell 2 core, that the tanker accident and oil spill 2 years ago were planned, and that the big shell was explicitly built for the development of Metal Gear. He then explains that the president must be helping the terrorists of his own free will, as his vital signs acted as a biometric password needed to activate the nuke and the new Metal Gear. Raiden and Ames cut their conversation short as Ocelot and Solidus appear. Raiden uses the directional microphone to eavesdrop on them, learning that they plan on establishing outer heaven. When Raiden mentions the $30 billion ransom, Ames tells him that there was no threat or ransom. According to Ames, the terrorists' intention all along was the high-altitude detonation of the nuke over Manhattan, which would cause an electromagnetic pulse, thus liberating it from control. Revolver Ocelot speaks to Ames, revealing that Ames was sent here to keep tabs on the president, suspecting he might betray them. Before Ames can give any more information, he suddenly suffers a fatal heart attack. Ocelot then turns on Raiden, but before he is captured, the Cyborg Ninja intervenes, helping Raiden escape.
So I think the most interesting thing that's revealed in this scene is that Fatman is totally unaware of the ransom demand.
Yeah.
What
100%.
What are you talking about?
30 billion.
It's like, if you detonate the bomb, you'll never get the 30 billion. Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
What 30? It's like the ransom, like the whole freaking reason we're here. And he's like, I see what's going on. He's kind of vague about it. So after the fight, Raiden calls the colonel right away and is suspicious. Like, he didn't know anything about this ransom. Are you holding something from me? No,
I'm telling you everything I know.
I'll look into it. Yeah. I'll look into this idea that, So this, again, this is going to happen a couple times here coming up, where Raiden becomes more and more suspicious that the colonel is, withholding information from him. And he keeps saying, like, no, they don't tell me all the details either. Like, I don't know the facts.
I'm pulling all the strings, and I'm pulling in every favor I have to figure this out for you.
What's really going on. So part of that is going to be what happens in the next conversation, which is with Mr. X. Cyborg Ninja shows up and basically explains that this facility is a cover-up. They're actually developing a Metal Gear here.
Right.
And so, he calls the colonel to confront him about that. Like, you really didn't know this? You really didn't know? Like, I promise I didn't know. No, definitely not. I'm going to look more into that. Like, just be a little patient. But I think the most interesting thing, as far as a note that I took from the Mr. X conversation, because Mr. X shows up to give Raiden not only intel about the fact that there's a Secret Service agent here, Mr. Ames, or Richard Ames, who can help him locate the president. But you're going to need an enemy uniform and an enemy weapon, an AK-74, I think, in order to like pass as one of the people on the team in there. And you're going to need to get this like microphone to find Ames, because he has a pacemaker. And so you have to listen to the heartbeats of all of these different hostages and find the right one, which is cool. And I'll talk about that in a minute too. I feel like,
unless two people have pacemakers.
Well, let me get to that in a second. I want to talk about the Mr. X conversation first, because the most interesting part of that conversation is that Mr. X claims to be a messenger from the Lali Lule Lo. I didn't catch that, I think, on my very first playthrough of the game.
No, I don't think so either.
I think I had kind of like, I don't know, glazed over that for a second. But like, just straight up, I'm a messenger. I'm neither, I think what Mr. X says is, I'm neither a friend nor an enemy.
Yes, I remember that line.
Just a messenger from the Lale Lule Lo, or something like that. So that like really changed my perspective on the second playthrough. I was like, oh, I didn't catch that the first time. And the lines of dialogue here between the two of them. Why won't you identify yourself? Says Raiden. There's no need for you to know. I'll decide whether I need to know. You are not yet trusted to make such decisions.
Right. Yes, that's right. Yeah.
There's a lot of lines here I didn't pick up on the first time. And then when you go through, I don't know if it's again, it's possible there's just there's a lot of information. There's a lot of explanations going on. And maybe in one playthrough, one shouldn't be expected to like remember everything.
Okay. Yeah, there's a lot.
Maybe you're distracted at the moment that line is said. Your wife walks in the room. I don't know the reason. But going back through this, it's like, holy crap. There's, I think, 3 times in just this section of what we played for this week where essentially people are telling Raiden to his face, he is there on behalf of the Lalilulelo. He's there on behalf of the Patriots.
Yeah.
Richard Ames basically says it right to his face as soon as they start talking. I'm here with, or I was sent by the Lalilulelo just like you, is what he says to him. And Raiden's like, what? Like, what are you talking about? So like, this is dropped multiple times, and they just don't. Maybe it's the fact that Raiden never seems to like investigate that further. Wait, what did you mean by that?
Right.
Say that again. Like, why did you say that?
Yeah.
What are you talking about? Why do you think I'm set by I'm not. Why would you say that? They kind of just move on. They just like change the subject really quickly. So that's probably part of it too. That scene just kind of keeps moving.
It's done in a way that you just don't pick up on.
Yeah, you're not given time to like process that, understand it, question it more, because then they're going to dump a whole bunch more info on you, like back to back.
Or your just assumption would be similar to Raiden, or just like, oh, he's mistaken.
Yeah,
right? And just keep going.
Right. So yeah, two things there about Mr. X I didn't pick up on the first time playing through.
Yeah.
Mr. X then confirms that the terrorists didn't bring a nuke with them. It was developed here all along, and the cleanup is a cover-up, which Raiden confronts the colonel about.
But then there's another, and this is super deep to the theme of this whole game, the theme of the whole game, because they've swayed us back and forth a couple of times in terms of what is importance or the value of memes and whatnot, right? And Raiden is now in a point where he hasn't been told so much. The nuke was already here. They didn't bring it. It was already here.
Yeah.
And the 30 billion Fatman didn't even know about.
Yeah.
And we're going to learn more stuff later on. But at the moment, it's like, who are these people, right? But how would I put this? He's thrown into chaos. He's being slowly like dipped into the ocean of chaos, right? And he's like losing sight of what he's supposed to do and like what the whole like, I don't know. He's losing sight of the mission. He's losing trust. We'll put it that way. He's losing trust in the direction of the mission and what exactly he's doing here. And this is where Ninja gives him the line, because Raiden asks, why should I believe any of this? But then Ninja says, you have no choice but to believe. This is a really good line, especially in relation to the problems that have just been brought up. Peter Stillman saying, oh man, didn't do the memes enough. And then you're introduced to Vamp's memes, which is, oh crap, memes can go horribly wrong. And then you show up to Ninja with this problem of, why in the world would I trust you? I don't even know who you are. What are you? What is happening here? I'm confused. I don't even know who to trust right now. And the ninja simply says, you have no choice but to believe. You have no choice but to trust. You don't get the luxury of making decisions based on 100% perfectly provable evidence. You have to act based on trust and belief. That is the only way. And this is kind of the because once you see the two competing meme systems, then being like, well, discarding with the idea of memes altogether sounds pretty appealing. Like, oh, dang it, your memes take you that way, your memes take you this way. Well, just if you don't know which meme to go with, then let's just go with none of them, right? You don't have, that's not an option. You can't just go with zero memes. You have to pick which memes you're going to follow. You have to pick who you're going to trust and what things you're going to believe. You can't just believe nothing. You can't trust no one and nothing. You have no choice but to believe. And as Raiden kind of learns going forward, I don't know what else to do, and I have no choice but to trust this person now, right? So it's really good thematic stuff that's happening here in that conversation. I thought was really good.
Yeah. One thing that I really appreciate just in general as like a game design principle or philosophy is mixing up how you're playing the game throughout. Like not developing a battle system and then your gameplay is just fighting for 90% of the gameplay. You're just walking forward, fighting. I really appreciate it when games mix it up. There needs to be moments where you're changing, altering sort of like the context of how you play
Yeah.
in order to keep it interesting.
Yeah.
So it doesn't become repetitive. So you're not just doing the same thing over and over and over, and it becomes boring, even if it's a solid, sort of main gameplay loop or something like that. I still think it's important to mix it up a lot in between there. And that's one thing that Hideo Kojima does really well. So, this whole section here where you have to go get the microphone to listen to the pacemakers of the hostages is like a whole mechanic of the game that only really is relevant for one section.
That's true.
And in sort of I feel like the modern game design philosophy, it's almost like that would be looked at from this sort of corporate lens, this business side of things as a waste of time and resources.
Yes. Yeah.
Don't develop this entire way of playing that only comes into play at one section and then is abandoned entirely.
Yeah.
Once you've developed that system, at least use it multiple times. And, in sort of like the modern open world adventure, narrative driven.
Everything's available at all times.
Yeah. It's like we're going to put this type of mission throughout the world 40 times.
Yeah.
And then here's another one that's a little different than that. It's repeated 30 times throughout the world. And here's all the icons where that you can go do that thing. Right. It's become a thing
like
where
Mass Effect.
you develop a set of gameplay systems or modes or whatever you want to call
Just
that.
like rules.
And then we're going to repeat that and spread it out throughout the game and get a lot of mileage out of the R&D and time spent developing that system. I love where you have something like this, where you just have this single lone example.
Yeah.
Where this idea of going around, and someone had to design that. Someone had programmed that little heart meter thing and the listening in. I guess that's repeated a couple, twice.
The area, you're right. But the area of effect is really narrow. It wouldn't be. I'm not saying it would be super hard to have developed that, but it's not that simple either.
No.
Right? It would have taken somebody some time to kind of change the engine parameters to where, everything worked perfectly.
Yeah. And then that has to be tested and that has to be refined. And there's a lot of time and effort that goes into making that mechanic work.
Yeah.
And it's basically just to identify one guy that you have a conversation with here. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I love that though. I love that. It
do too.
Mixed up this whole section of the gameplay. And even just the whole dressing up as the enemies, right? You don't do this again at any other point in the game. It's just for this one section.
Yeah.
They are handcrafting each sort of level of the game in a way to make it memorable and interesting in its own right.
Right.
Rather than just relying on a set of design or systems that they made and then okay, how can we spread these out and design our levels around that particular game mechanic.
Yeah.
Rather, they designed the scenario first and then designed the mechanic to fit that scenario.
Which is good. I respect that.
A lot.
That makes sense.
A lot.
That's good.
And I would love to see this be more common in games because I feel like that is a very common criticism or complaint with a lot of modern games. God, my goodness, this is really fun at first, but then it just gets so repetitive and you just keep repeating the same thing.
Yeah.
Again, this really kind of goes back or has its origins in Assassin's Creed. That was one of the biggest complaints about the original Assassin's Creed was you just do the same 5 missions over and over and over and over and over again. And for whatever reason, that game became the foundation of narrative-driven action-adventure games.
Yeah.
But point is, I loved it. I loved this section for that reason. It was different. You had to wait for the guy to go up to the retinal scanner and put him in there. It mixed it up quite a bit, and I really, really liked it.
The games like Xenogears or a lot of games back in the day would design whole big systems of gameplay just for one
Yeah.
kind of moment
Mini
or scene or
games
sequence.
and-
Yeah, mini games, all that stuff. If I could think of modern examples that do something similar, it would probably be the Nier games. That include a lot of variable gameplay that really mixes things up in a creative way that most studios say don't bother with
That's
that.
a great example too. I remember we talked about that a lot in the Near Replicant podcast that we did. Automata 2 has a good mix, but
it does.
particularly Near Replicant, there's that whole section in the forest where it's just like a visual novel all of a sudden.
So good. So
Not even
crazy.
really a visual novel. It's just literally
Just a
reading
novel.
text for however long you have to sit there and read it.
Sometimes it takes a while.
Yeah, it's like a super long section of just black screen with white text on it.
Yeah.
But it works, like
Right.
it mixes it up. It makes things different. You don't know what to expect.
Games used to do this. Like it used to be on a game, you'd be playing the game, and all of a sudden it becomes a whodunit murder mystery on a train, and you got to go talk to everyone and figure out.
Yeah.
Like games used to do this kind of thing, and they didn't used to just be one thing.
Yeah,
and that's something I miss about older games.
Yeah, so I really really liked this section for that reason, but also because the conversation with Ames is really good. So there are a lot of bombs dropped here by Ames.
Yes.
First one I already
Very
kind of
revealing.
mentioned. I'm Richard Ames, Secret Service. No, I was sent in by the Lale Lulelo just like you.
That's wild.
What?
That's wild.
Also, while he's saying this, Ocelot is watching them talk.
Yeah, he is on a camera.
And I didn't notice this the first time either. I caught this on the second playthrough. Ames says, let's switch over to nano communication, which we've already established is nano machine magic telepathy.
Telepathy, yeah.
You're just thinking to each other. And as soon as they do that, there's this long shot of the screen he's watching them on where they're just silently staring at each other. And he just gets like, he gets like frustrated or like annoyed. Like, dang it, like I can't listen in anymore. So that was interesting.
Yeah.
Because we already got from like the tanker sequence that Ocelot claims to be with the Patriots, right? With the Lale Lulelo.
Yeah, he mentioned that.
So when Ames says this, when Ames says, I'm with the Lale Lulelo just like you, that's when they cut to Ocelot watching them. Ocelot is the eyes of the Lale Lulelo, like watching him go through this, right?
Yeah.
Very similarly to the tanker sequence in which he was watching Snake too. He was like, our boy just landed.
That's
and he's
right.
like, he's here now, right?
Right on
so
time.
he's got his hands in on everything. He knows what's going on. It's all part of this like orchestration, this plan. So that was really interesting. Now I took down the lines of dialogue that explain how the nuclear football, the codes, the nuclear codes work.
Yeah.
This is pretty interesting and I think fairly well thought through.
Yeah, I thought it was kinda cool.
The password is nothing less than the physiological data of the U.S. president, the president's own vital signs, heartbeat, brainwave pattern, blood pressure, and so on. They're consistently monitored and relayed by his internal nanomachines. So the password for the nuke is like all the vital signs of the president at like resting normal state. And he has to, via his own free will, like decide to initiate or input the password.
And then it happens. Yeah.
Right. It's all done. Just makes a decision, decides to do it. Bam. This information, along with the DNA pattern, serves as a biometric password, unbreakable even by the latest parallel processor supercomputers. The password entry itself cannot be performed unless brainwave patterns and heartbeats fall within normal parameters, rendering chemical and other forms of coercion impractical. In other words, the login must be made by the president of his own free will. As a failsafe, the input must also be reconfirmed hourly, even after the initial login. If a valid confirmation is not forthcoming, the system will automatically cancel the login. And then Raiden says, and that's why they can't harm the president, at least until the bird flies, until the nuke is launched. So, for the time being, they got to keep him alive, right? And after he's explained this to him, this is where Solidus and Ocelot walk in to have their conversation. He's like,
Yeah.
hey, use your like microphone, listen into that conversation, right? So I love how you're going back and forth and like the subtitles like grow and shrink.
Yeah, depending on how
loud or how close or how well you're hearing it. Really cool little abstract way of reinforcing that idea.
Yeah.
Visually. So during their conversation, Solidus asks Ocelot, what about the president? The password entry has already been made to the black case. In 1 hour, we'll need a confirmation from him. His work after that is done. Make sure to keep him alive until then. Until they can get that reconfirmation an hour after the initial input, if the president is assassinated, this whole thing gets canceled.
Yeah.
So it's like, don't let him die.
Right. You got 1 hour. The countdown.
Now, this is just so crazy to me how many layers of confusion they put around Ocelot. Like, Ocelot has already claimed over here. Well, first, he's with the Russians.
But he's a Russian that dresses like a Western cowboy and slings a Colt like revolver. He's not exactly the memes that he imbibes. The memes that he like exudes are not the memes of a Russian.
Sure.
Yeah.
But he doesn't care about them. He's with the Patriots, right? That's what we thought. But now he's with Solidus, who is clearly against the Patriots.
Yeah.
Is as we learn here very shortly after this, he was originally George Sears, the former president, who was appointed by the Patriots to be the president.
Yes.
Yeah. But anyway, he's now trying to use this nuke not as like a weapon to hurt anybody, but as a high altitude detonation and an EMMA pulse, which would take New York City down power wise and would liberate it from the control of the Patriots, which he would then take over. And he's trying to create outer heaven, which was a whole big boss thing, which we'll talk a lot more about in other Metal Gear games.
Okay.
But Ocelot seems to be allied with Solidus here. So it's like he's playing him or which way.
So then the question is, why did he betray Gurlukovich if I guess he hates Russia, but now he also maybe hates the Patriots.
Yeah.
The New England Patriots and New York City, I suppose. Right. Close. And then Solidus. So Solidus becomes the question mark. Like what's his goal? Like, what does Solidus want from all this? And it's really cool the way that they kind of show, I think it's Ames, or I believe it's Ames, who says, there he is, Snake's coming in, go listen in. And it's like, we don't know, who is this person calling himself Snake all the time? Yes. And so we're like, all right, let's listen to it. I love how...
So there's some interesting stuff here too. Let me get through Ocelot real quick, and then we'll come back to Solidus. So it's like, he's calling him king. He's definitely working with him.
Yeah.
Solidus even mentions when Olga comes in, something along the lines of, where would the two of you even go without me? Like, I'm the only one who would take you in. You have no country. You can't go back to Russia, for instance. Like, definitely can't.
Well, so Olga's whole thing, her father wanted her to just stay in America and live a good life as an American.
This is a country of liberty.
yes, of course.
I laughed at that line. But anyway, he's like, in this political climate, like, who would accept you? So there's also some infighting going on between Olga and Ocelot there.
Yeah, definitely.
I love it, is what I'm trying to get at. I love how mysterious they have made Ocelot at this point. Like, Ocelot was a good villain, even going back to the first game.
Yeah, he was good.
But like at this point, he's like next level. Because even back then he was talking to Solidus, George Sears, the president of the US.
Yeah.
You know, that's what adds another layer of mystery to this. Right. Is he allied with Solidus or not? Because Solidus is not, he's fighting the Patriots.
Right.
Ocelot is with the Patriots. But he's been calling and chatting with Solidus and like making plans all the way back to the first game.
Yeah.
So it's cool. It's just, cool. It leaves you in a place where like man, what's going on? You're intrigued by that mystery, and you got to find out more.
Yeah.
So I
and
like
not
how
to
they
mention,
did that.
Ames also, at this conversation, Ames brings up, no hostages got killed. What are you talking about?
Yes.
And
right.
even brings this line up here. Haven't they told you anything?
Yes.
Is what Ames says. And that's where, as the player, I don't know exactly how you're supposed to feel as the player, but that's a shock to hear, basically. Like, after talking with Ames and us being like, yeah, don't worry, I know what's going on. Yeah, okay, I know. And then after talking to him for a bit, it's like, wait, what's going on here? I have no idea what's going on. And he's accusing Raiden of not knowing anything at all. Like, have they not told you anything?
Yeah.
That's a big deal. And especially as you're talking about drowning in the sea of confusion, right? Which is the mimetic landscape, by the way. In many ways, it's a sea of confusion that's easy to drown in, but you have no choice but to pick some things up so that you can stay afloat. Raiden is just not knowing what to do. It's the idea of grasping at straws, right? But he still thinks that he knows, right? Like, his ego's intact. Like, he's still, I'm on a mission. I'm here to do the thing. And Ames is just like, do you even know, like, why you're here? Like, do you know what, I know you think you know what you're doing, but do you really know what you're doing?
Yeah.
And Raiden doesn't
have a clue.
He doesn't have a clue.
He has no idea.
But he thinks he does enough, right? So he's going to stick with whatever he does know. But yeah, this is where Revolver Ocelot just kind of walks out and walks straight towards us, right?
Yep.
And it's like,
quick,
oh, great.
Get your AK back out.
Yeah. Don't worry. I know. And Ocelot knows right away. He's just like, I don't know what you're doing, but I do know you. And Ames is, trying to make his little defense. When Ames dies of basically sudden heart attack.
It reminded me of like Death Note.
Oh gosh, totally. Yeah, totally. That's pretty funny.
I mean, Death Note came much later, but
yeah,
it was almost exactly like that. This effect and everything.
Yeah,
like,
and the heartbeat kind of.
Like, yeah, exactly.
But it did remind me a lot of Metal Gear Solid 1. That there's a thing that can you just die at certain inconvenient or very convenient times, depending on how you look at it.
Very convenient times.
But Ocelot was kind of looking to talk to the guy a little bit. And Ocelot seemed a little surprised by that himself.
That as well, right? Because he turns to Ames and says, I didn't realize, what was it, the DIA?
Yeah, their DEA.
Put out first-rate or second-rate liars or something like that.
Yeah.
He's like, what do you mean? He's like, you are Colonel Richard Ames. Right. You were sent here to keep tabs on the president. Because again, Raiden has essentially put together the accusation. The president of the United States had to have willingly input these codes, meaning he's cooperating with the terrorists.
There's no other way.
That's the only reason that input was put in. That's what they just said. So Ames was sent here because President Johnson was betraying the Patriots. He's going against the Patriots by working with these terrorists. And so Ames was sent there to keep tabs on the president on behalf of the Patriots. So now Ocelot has walked up, called him out for this, a person who has also claimed to be with the Patriots earlier, and puts his gun to his head as if he's going to shoot him. Like, you were not able to carry out your duty. And that's when the heart attack happens. Yeah. And then Ames starts going like, wait a second, you tricked me, Ocelot.
Yeah.
You did this. I understand now. And then dies.
And then he dies.
Just like, what?
Yeah.
They have, I can't stress it enough. I love what they have done with Ocelot by the end of the scene.
Yeah,
you have no idea who he's allied with, whether he's playing everybody, and what his real goals are.
In which case, he could just be a smarter Fatman, right?
Sure.
Where he's just like, look, I also am just in it for number one, and I'm just going to do whatever I want, and I will betray everyone around me whenever I need to so that I can get what I want. Or he actually is aligned with somebody, but it's difficult to tell who. And also, is he as powerful as maybe he thinks he is as well? Right? Where it's like, okay, is this like the bad guy of the game? Well, like we'll see. Yeah. But he seems to have a lot of control and influence.
Yeah. Okay. So
it's crazy. But then he goes to kill Raiden, right?
Yeah.
And that's when Cyborg Ninja just shows up
and almost cuts off his arm, which is another echo to the first game.
Oh, they also mentioned in the sequence where we're kind of listening in on, of that they recovered the body of Solid Snake, but he was missing his right arm. Something like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, that's true. That's an important
They say
point
that
for
here.
something. That's true.
Yeah.
I want to go back to Solidus real quick. So we talked a little bit last time about, is anyone fooled that Pliskin is Snake? Right. And apparently the reason why it's so obvious is because David Hayter is the voice of Snake and Pliskin.
Right.
But his clone brothers, Solidus and Liquid, have different voices. Way different voices.
That's interesting. I never really thought of that, but
so that's part
and different accents.
Yeah, totally different. Which makes sense in as far as like Liquid and Solid go. They went through very different military careers, and I believe Liquid went through the British Secret Service or something like that. I can't remember, but he was in Britain, and so it makes sense for Liquid to have a different accent and maybe a different, I don't know about different voice, but anyway, my point is, in this game, they are trying to make you believe that Solid Snake is leading the terrorists. Well, that's impossible. He died 2 years ago. So that's like the mystery they're building up. In the Japanese version of the game, Solidus is voiced by the same actor as Solid Snake.
Really?
So when Solidus walks in
they make that decision?
And has this conversation with Ocelot, you're hearing Snake's voice. And it's the same voice as Pliskin. And it's like, wait a minute. It would add to the confusion and actually build some legitimate mystery to that. Like, he's older. You can see kind of his white hair and stuff like that.
Yeah.
There's a whole nother element to Fox Die that isn't really explained here, but that is in Metal Gear Solid 4 that would help that become another layer of confusion for this. As to maybe Pliskin's not the real Snake. You know, the possibility of there could be another clone or something like that.
I kind of wish they did that.
I do too.
In the English version.
Too. I really wish they did. If David Hayter had voiced Solidus, it would have made a lot more sense.
Yeah. It would have made this whole scene even more confusing. You just explained how confusing this scene is, not in necessarily a bad way, but in a very intriguing, like what is happening kind of way. This would have added a whole nother layer to that onion.
Yes, exactly.
That would have been like wild.
So I don't know why they chose in the English version of the game to have Solidus have a very distinct and different voice from Solid Snake.
Okay.
But that's the way they went with it, and it's a little bit why. Again, the whole Pliskin thing just like did not really work. If that was meant to be a deception.
That would have been that almost would have patched everything. If it's like you hear Pliskin and you're like, oh, I know this is so totally Snake. It sounds just like him. But then you meet this guy and hear that voice from him as well. Then that would have kind of rewritten your previous perceptions on how it was so obvious that Pliskin is the Snake that we think we're referring to when we say, I know he's Snake.
Right.
That would have been crazy.
I mean, think of the upcoming fight, the Harrier scene, right?
Yeah.
Where Solidus like talks to you and says, like, I've been waiting for you. And he actually again says a messenger from the Lalilulelo or whatever he said from the Patriots. I think he says Patriots. It's important that he says Patriots and not Lalilulelo.
Yeah, I don't know that yet, but
later you will, but it's important.
Okay.
But he says Patriots.
Once again, to add to the confusion.
Yeah, he says Patriots. And he's like, I am Solid Snake.
Yeah.
And if he stepped out of the shadows, and he does have the same face. I mean, genetically, again, he's a clone of the same guy, Big Boss, right? He has the same face. He's just old,
right?
And he has the same voice as Solid Snake. And then Pliskin comes in. No, that's not Solid Snake. That would become then confusing. Like, oh, wait a minute. Like, who is and isn't lying? Pliskin's been lying to me the whole time.
It's the Spider-Man thing. It's the two Spider-Mans pointing at each other. And you got to determine which one's the real one, right?
But because they chose to give Solidus a different voice, it kind of ruins the whole thing.
It kind of does. Now, I do know this is just a little back. This goes back into the dev history a little bit. We did talk about this in Metal Gear Solid 1 briefly. But Hideo Kojima was never actually a fan of David Hayter's voice. Yeah. He didn't like it. And David Hayter knew this. I I have heard David Hayter talk about this before.
Yes.
He's very much like he's a very successful guy. He did more than just voice Snake. He has written like huge, like billion-dollar blockbuster movies. Like David Hayter is a very well-to-do man at this point. He has had success in multiple different facets of the entertainment industry. He's very talented, obviously. And so it's not like, but you can tell that it really doesn't sit well with him. The fact that Hideo Kojima didn't like his performance. Now, as any actor, you want to give a performance that the director is proud of.
Yeah.
And David Hayter tried, and he did such a good job, and all the fans love him so much to the point when they changed it in later games, people were really upset.
Yeah.
Even though they got some other high list.
Do you know what I love?
Actor.
Do you know what I love about? I don't know if you necessarily call it a redemption arc for Metal Gear because it's still in the hands of Konami, and Konami still sucks. But the fact that the upcoming remake of Metal Gear Solid 3 features David Hayter as Snake again is really great because obviously he was removed from Metal Gear Solid 5.
Yes.
And was replaced by
24 Jack Bauer.
What's his name?
Jack Bauer. Kevin. No.
Oh gosh.
Can't remember his name. I see his face. Agent Jack Bauer. Just say Agent Jack Bauer.
Yeah, that guy.
That 24, by the way, that show was pure propaganda. Pure post 9/11 like propaganda.
No, Kojima's like obsession now with working with A-list,
Kiefer Sutherland.
Kiefer Sutherland. His obsession with working with like A-list celebrities in all of his games.
Yeah.
And not, respecting the great presence and character that like David Hayter brought to this role.
And not recognizing that all of his fans love David Hayter's voice.
Like his voice is Snake.
Yeah.
Like no one thinks of Kiefer Sutherland's performance as being Snake.
He's Jack Bauer. There's a reason I called him Jack Bauer. He hasn't played Jack Bauer in 20 years, but he's Jack Bauer.
Yeah. So, yeah. Oh, they're not re-recording? Well, okay, if they're not re-recording, if they're keeping all the same audio for the remake of Metal Gear Solid 3, they are at least using David Hayter in promotional material for it. Okay. They are still putting him out there as the voice actor of Snake to market the game. Like, I remember there was a video sometime last year where they were talking more about it, and they have David Hayter like walking on a green screen, like pitching the game and talking about it and marketing it. And so they've brought him back in, and I like that. It's like he's associated as being the Snake voice actor again after the slight, after the total backhand diss of being removed by Hideo Kojima for Metal Gear Solid 5. So I like that. I like that they gave him that opportunity. Basically, the team that's working on Metal Gear Solid 3, I think that's, what is it, Delta or something Delta? The remake of Metal Gear Solid 3 is coming up this year.
Oh, cool.
The team that has been assigned to make that, they are like way in on faithfulness to this original thing.
That's
like shot for shot. This is the same exact game.
I mean, that's how everyone should be, but that's cool.
So anyways, I like that David Hayter's been given a chance to be brought back in.
Me too. He's been out of it for a while, and you can tell it's just weird when everyone loves, this would be like Peter Jackson being like, I really didn't like Aragorn. What's his name? Who played Aragorn? Dang it.
Oh, geez.
Viggo Mortensen wasn't a very good actor, I think. And everyone's like, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? It's, I don't think he was very... I wish we had stuck with the younger Aragorn that we had previously cast. I'm horrible at doing Peter Jackson's voice, by the way. Peter Jackson, Lord of the Rings. But they cast a different actor, right? And then how weird would it be to like this? You've made tons of money. The thing sold like crazy. The fans love it, but the director doesn't like it.
Doesn't like it.
What's going on here?
It's a weird dissonance.
Once again, there is that dissonance though between Kojima and even his own fan base that loves his games. Yeah. There's a weird kind of tension there that he and only he. Okay, maybe other people do this pretty well too, but he is very good at keeping that dissonance without the fan base turning on him.
Sure.
Right? He can make fun of you to your face in the game, digitally. He can make fun of you directly. He can but he gets away with it because he's really good.
Yeah.
He's really talented at making games. But yeah, there's this weird disconnect there. And I'm feeling it, especially in the second playthrough of the game, I'm feeling it. And then knowing kind of some of the future things that would then happen in Kojima's career, including splitting from David Hayter and splitting from Konami altogether. That tension is, you can feel it. Like, it's there even from this early on in Metal Gear Solid 2.
There's a great video going around the internet right now, which I have not been able to watch yet, but it's been sent to me by a couple people on Discord and Patreon and stuff like that, which is essentially about Hideo Kojima's relationship with his voice actors, particularly the lesser known ones, not the A-list celebrities he works with now, and the disrespect, more or less.
Yeah.
Again, I haven't seen it. I haven't watched it yet, but that's more or less the gist of what the thumbnail and title tells me. Maybe I should put a link to that so people can go check that out.
That would be interesting to look at. But like you were saying, he's got the idea of the Hollywood actor A-lists like up on this high pedestal. And he's always just like trying to reach that. That's all he wants to do. He does not want to make games. He wants to make movies.
He really
wants
does.
to be a Hollywood director, working with Brad Pitt and Tom Cruise. That's what he wants to be.
Yeah.
And there's almost some you almost feel some like slight resentment that he isn't doing that, and he's still making darn freaking video games. But he also makes some of the best video games ever. So it's like there's this it's a strange situation. It's almost as confusing as Raiden in the middle of this scene here talking to Ames and all of everything going on around him, right? And it's like, what's going on?
Okay, so that was a really long diversion to say the Solidus is Solidus actually Snake? Is Solid Snake actually leading the terrorists?
Yeah.
We're going to talk about this. Actually, by the time this goes up, we would have already done it on Monday in our plot twists episode that we're about to record. I still don't think it was like handled perfectly. It would, again, but here's the other part of it. Okay, this is the part I forgot to mention. The other part of this that is interesting is if you had not played Metal Gear Solid 1, but you bought Metal Gear Solid 2, the Sons of Liberty launch edition.
Right. That's right, yeah.
When you boot the game up, it asks you, have you played the first game or not? If you say no, you go straight to Big Shell. You do not play the tanker mission in the beginning.
Or no, if you say yes, if you say you have played the first game, then you go straight to Big Shell.
No, I'm pretty sure it's the other way around.
So if you say you haven't played Metal Gear 1 at all.
So they don't want you to know about Snake.
Interesting. Yeah.
So you're going into this as if you are Raiden with zero knowledge about Metal Gear Solid 1 or where Snake has been. And so
that's brilliant.
And so then they're saying this legendary Solid Snake is leading these terrorists. You don't have the tanker mission as context in that case. So I could see this deception of Pliskin working. One,
because you didn't play the tanker mission.
You didn't play the tanker mission. You haven't seen Snake's face, and you haven't heard his voice in this game.
Yeah.
So you don't even have that. But then you have these two guys who have the same voice. It's like, what is going on here? That could make the deception work without the tanker mission and without having played Metal Gear Solid 1. But if you have played Metal Gear Solid 1 and you know who Snake is, like, you are supposed to know Pliskin is Snake. If that makes sense? So it's like, if you're knowledgeable, if you were there, if you were with Snake in the first game, you know Pliskin is Snake.
Right.
And that's fine.
And that's fine.
But if you weren't, and you're just purely in Raiden's POV because you haven't had any contact with the first game or the tanker mission, then you're way confused. So it's a really interesting scenario in which I wish, I just don't know why they didn't handle it this way in the following editions. It's just, they just have that screen where it's like, tanker, you can select tanker big shell or tanker rig or whatever it is, tanker or rig. You can choose to play one or the other or one to the other.
Right.
But it doesn't have any context for like why you would start here instead of here.
Like just do both.
It's just really confusing.
Now, this also makes me wonder about the marketing too, that there were many people who played the game who never even got to play as Snake for 1 second.
Yes. That's true too.
But those people wouldn't have cared as much because they didn't know who Snake was, right?
Or like maybe if you answered that question no, and you go straight to Big Shell, you saw all that stuff in the trailer of like the oil rig, not the oil rig,
the ship, the tanker, and it's a totally different game.
And it's like, when is this going to happen? Maybe this is coming later. Gosh, or something.
I would almost say there have to be some like lawsuits within this. You're
tanker plant. Thank you. Yeah. It's really different when you look at it, knowing how it was in its original launch edition.
Yeah, and that's something that's we try to in this podcast. We try to get or experience things in the context of their original. It's just hard to do that sometimes. Yeah, it's hard to do that
because I played Substance first, which I have. I have the PS2 copy of Metal Gear Solid Substance.
Yeah,
but that's not the launch edition. That's not Sons of Liberty. So I didn't have that option provided to me. So it was, anyway. So when I learned that, I was like, okay, now I'm rethinking this. This really would have worked.
It does recolor. Because I read those same comments too. It does recolor everything, actually. Yeah. It changes things a lot, and it does help us to kind of put our shoes back in, try to put our shoes into where people were when they were so upset 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And also why some of these things either hit or land differently.
Yeah.
Depending on that. Ames also suggests that there might be two snakes. He makes that direct suggestion as well.
Yes, right.
Because there's some doubt about something or other where it's like, that snake. And then Raiden's like, that snake? Well, that's what he says. But there might be more than just one.
Possibly be Snake. We recovered his body. Blah, 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 blah.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Anyway, I was thinking we were going to get further than this, but I think we got to stop there.
Ames is the stopping point, but we will stop literally on the frame where Cyborg Ninja is right in front of Revolver Ocelot with the sword protecting Raiden from being executed. And that
pick it up from there
is where we're going to pick up next time.
All right, dudes. Yeah. Thanks for watching. Keep it coming. We appreciate your support. We appreciate you watching and participating, and we'll see you again next week. Peace out.